Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Cartoon Cosmonauts, a podcast all about animated short films and their creators. Each episode features a new guest giving us the lowdown on their approach to making animation. I'm your host, Joseph Orr, and a quick reminder that this podcast is available on all major podcasting platforms as well as on YouTube as a video interview. So, on this episode, I am pleased to welcome special guest Jeff Tharp. Jeff is a miniature set designer and stop-motion animator, best known for his Star Wars creations, and also for his behind-the-scenes content that he posts on Instagram as Lord Tharp. As always on this podcast, I like to focus on one particular film as we discuss the animation process. Today we're going to chat to Jeff about his stop-motion Star Wars short entitled Go Rogue, Tall Tale. Now, if you haven't seen it, I would recommend you go to his YouTube page, Jeff Tharp, and watch it. I will leave links to his YouTube and his Instagram below. Watch it and then follow along as we discuss. But for now, let's jump right in and start the show. Jeff, thank you so much for coming on to the show. Thanks for being here. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. I'm glad to be here, Joseph.
And whereabouts in the world are you broadcasting from at the moment?
I am on the west coast of America, in the state of Oregon, the city of Salem, which is the capital city of the state of Oregon here in the States.
Wow. Okay. Oh, I love the Salem vibe straight away there. Kind of nice Halloween witch connotations. Nice. Not that Salem, but still.
Yeah, it's Salem, Massachusetts, actually on the East Coast is where all that craziness
where that comes
went
from.
down.
Okay. This Salem isn't as witch renowned.
No, it is not.
No. Okay.
No.
The good Salem.
Yeah. Thankfully, we don't have any like bad history like that.
Yeah. That's those guys. Yeah.
We have we're famous for the Oregon Trail, actually.
Okay, cool.
Which there was a popular PC game back in the 90s, and there's a lot of people that migrated over here back in the 1800s from other states back in the day. So they went through lots of treacherous terrain to found this state.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. I love a little bit of history behind things. And just in a stop motion sense, that's where Leica is based, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. They're up in Portland, Oregon. Yeah. So,
brilliant. Okay. Is that far from you? My geography is terrible.
It is it's not far. It's maybe an hour with traffic. Sometimes if there's no traffic, it's 45 minutes. It's not bad.
Cool. Okay. Nice. And do they have any kind of like a visitors thing, or is it just a closed off studio? Like
they do. And actually, I'm kind of ashamed that I have not visited there. My wife and I, we're both huge stop motion animation fans, huge Leica fans. And so we've talked about going there, but we just haven't made it yet.
It's terrible, isn't it? Because it's always the things that you're closest to. Like for me,
it's funny,
living in Dublin, the amount of people who I meet when they come over here and they're like, oh, the Guinness Storehouse, blah blah blah. And up until about a year ago, I'd never been, and they're like, how have you not been there? And you're like, when it's in your backyard, you're kind of like, you're not.
Things become they become it's there. I'll get there eventually. Yeah. It's so funny how those things. Yeah, we used to live up in Portland, and a lot of people moved up here. Within the last 5 years, moved up here from California and other places, and would always be like, oh, this trail there's a lot of hiking trails, and there's a lot of really cool scenery here in Oregon, and people would be like, oh yeah, you've been here, right? Or you've done this, right? I'm like, no.
Yeah, it gets to the stage where you kind of just have to go, I have been there. Of course I've been there. Of course I've lived here.
So I get it.
Brilliant. And so I suppose just to start off, because the nature of this podcast kind of like to just do a little bit of kind of backstory, because eventually we'll get to talking about your stop motion film, Go Rogue, Tall Tale. But can you talk to us about maybe how you got into animation?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll actually never forget it. It was, I don't know what the equivalent is over in where you are, but we call it elementary school. So I was like 11 years old.
Okay.
So would that be primary school?
That's bang on.
So I was in school, and we did a class project, and my teacher everybody got into groups of 2, and we had to do stop motion animation. And so I grew up watching claymation, the famous like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, stop motion animation from the 60s, I believe. And there's Santa Claus is Coming to Town. So every Christmas I would watch those. I also watched this one called Claymation Christmas. Some people who are listeners might know what that is. It was from either, I think, like the late 80s, early 90s. And I just loved it. And I found out, we were going to use a program on our the class computer, and you had to do like a 1 minute or 30-second video. And I was like, you can actually make movies this way. And I was like, my mind was blown.
It is crazy.
Yeah. And so I remember it was actually because we wanted to do a war film, because we were like 10-year-old boys, and
guns, explosions.
And my teacher was like, no violence. And we're like, no, it's educational. So we decided to do a story of the Revolutionary War, the American Revolution. And so we had the British troops, and we had the, Continental soldiers, and we had them fight their little army men that we had.
This is quite a production for your first one. Like, wow, that's ambitious.
Yeah. And so that was really the beginning. But at that time I had thought, you can only do it with a computer. You can only do it with, and then I found out from another friend who was like, hey, my friend and I do this all the time using a video camera. And that blew my mind even more, because it was really, really, really janky, but you would like hit record and then stop really quick. So it would capture a frame or 2 frames. It wasn't perfect, but you could do it.
It was a way of doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. And my, growing up, my more of a car guy, he wasn't as interested in cameras. And so it was, I remember I would have to like borrow my friends' cameras but man, that opened up a whole nother thing. But yeah, I was about 10 when my introduction to
that's amazing motion. That you got to, I suppose, like that practical experience, because a lot of people I've spoken to, their love of animation was purely like viewing. It wasn't interactive. It's like, I saw these great movies, and I think there was a certain point where like behind the scenes making of things were like really popular, in terms of, there was a point where I think no one wanted to share their process for fear of like, oh, hey, I could do that. And then it became kind of a thing where people like really wanted to see, hands in the frame and how people were doing things. But that's crazy that you got kind of experience that early on to realize.
I know. Like, not everybody's had that experience, and so I have Mr. Wilkes to thank for that.
Okay.
Who I doubt is listening to this, but
if he is, if he's out there,
Mr. Wilkes, if you're listening, you're the reason why I'm,
I've devoted many hours of my life, good and bad, to this.
Yeah.
And is there a particular, and it doesn't necessarily have to be stop motion, is there a particular like animated movie or TV show that, I suppose, either from young or even now, that you're particularly fond of, that you think has had a kind of an impact on you?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I mentioned them before, that definitely the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer stop motion movie from back in the day. I still watch it every year. And then also Claymation Christmas. Those were the two, I would say. And then actually, when I was younger, there was a stop motion thing. I remember my teacher, this is before we had like TVs I was born in 85. So, there was some, my earliest memories, we had like projectors. They were still using projectors. They weren't wheeling in a TV on a cart or yeah. And it was Wind in the Willows, which was like it was like a stop motion thing. And I remember very vividly, like, I think there's like a fox or a wolf in it, or he's like one of the
picture characters.
Yeah. And he was like swashbuckling. He's like fighting bad guys with a sword on these stairs. And I thought that was so cool. And, all heroic. And but that was also definitely those images of that I always loved
had an impact on you. And I think there's something very kind of timeless about stop motion, in terms of it just ages very well.
Well, and I would even say some of the other movies that really influenced me as well were the Wallace and Gromit movies, the Aardman Wallace and Gromit movies, for sure. And then also A Nightmare Before Christmas, for sure.
Yeah, it's
And
crazy.
James, yeah, but they are timeless. And I think
Yeah,
that they like I think it's because there's a very tactile aspect to stop motion. And I think that there's and also as a kid too, and even now, and my wife is the same way. I love miniature things.
yeah,
And so I think that there's some degree of that as well that I love about, yeah, these are all miniature sets. These are all, these are like my action figures,
yeah,
and
yeah.
like as a kid, just like my imagination, I have a big imagination anyways. And as a kid, especially so. And I think that there was that whole aspect too of seeing the world around me and being like, ooh, what could I do with this? Or how could
Yeah.
I,
It's just
which
so
is
accessible, and you're like, exactly like you said, like that's what got me into animation, is like you have stories in your head that you want to tell, and unfortunately to make a film, it sounds very sad, but like, you have to get a lot of people in, and then it's like everyone's time scheduling, whereas with stop motion, when it starts off, for most people I know, it's quite a solitary act. But the fact that you could have an action figure or a car or a toy, and you can tell a story with this as your main actor, chipping away at it frame by frame. There's something very, very gratifying, but also kind of accessible about that, because you're like, I just have to take this camera and away I go. I have a
that's
story,
it. Yeah.
and off
Yeah.
you go. And do you
Yeah.
think, is there a particular like artist or kind of filmmaker or something like that that you think has kind of like influenced your kind of work in terms of like your style or something like that? Is there anyone you think of?
I'm not an animator by trade, but it's one that it's stop motion is something that I keep coming back to,
Okay.
So I would say my influences obviously have been George Lucas,
Okay.
but I would say even just the stop motion animators from ILM back in the 70s and 80s, those guys, I think Phil Tippett and those guys,
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
there's just observing them. I've always had it. And then obviously Jim Henson has actually been another huge influence for me.
Okay.
Just his whimsical style. I love the whole idea of using just practical stuff. Even in The Force Awakens, I remember when I think it's Finn or someone is sitting in the Millennium Falcon and they bump the Dejeric table, the holochess table,
Oh yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
then it pops up and it's like a continuation of the chess game that they were playing in A New Hope. And Chewie kind of perks up when he's like
Yeah.
sitting there with the bandaged arm. And that actually was done with stop motion,
Was it? I didn't
and
know that.
it
They
was,
kind of
yeah.
stuck to that.
Yeah, it
Wow.
was the same guy. I want to say it's Phil Tippett. I could be wrong, but one of those guys
It's a
who,
continuation of that style. Wow, brilliant. I
yeah,
love that they stuck with that, because I think sometimes, unfortunately, stop motion is seen as like it does take longer, and sometimes there isn't that the patience for it, in terms of like, oh, we can do that, CG a lot quicker, a lot cheaper. Whereas
right.
I think to continue on something like that is very cool, to stick to that style.
Right. And there's a lot of debate too right now, especially because of like the Lego movies that came out, that they did it in kind of a way, because brick films are really popular, and they
Mm.
kind of did it sort of in that style, but it was CGI.
Yes.
And so it does have a choppy, and I don't know if you've ever seen Corridor Digital. They're a YouTube channel. They're guys based in LA who they're a VFX house,
Cool.
but they do a lot of weekly videos, and some of your listeners probably will know who they
No,
are,
there.
but
I'll have to check them
yeah,
out.
but Corridor Digital. And he was like, one of the guys was like, he pointed at the Lego movie and he's like, this was the nail in the coffin for me for stop motion. We no longer need to do stop motion. I was like, I 100% disagree.
Disagree. Yeah.
Like, I think he's coming out from, he's a VFX guy, like the digital effects, and I get that. And they do some great work, that some of it looks photoreal.
Yeah.
But going back to what we were talking about with stop motion, like there's such a charm to this animation style.
Yeah.
And people, once especially when they're aware of the amount of work that goes into it, the appreciation for it increases,
Yeah. I always love
so
that about it, that you can take it at face value, and it's just, it's a cartoon movie for some people, and
yeah,
they're all actual puppets, and people go, oh, really? Oh, that's kind of cool. But
yeah,
I love that you can scratch the surface a little bit more and see those photos where, like someone's house which you think, you know, in scale is probably about this big, you see a full person and they're not even as tall as it, and you're like, oh wow, the scale of that was built. I think you just really appreciate the kind of artistry that goes into it.
Right.
And had you studied any form of animation at all, or kind of filmmaking? No. Okay,
None.
cool. So
Nope,
and how
just
did you
all.
get, it was just kind of like as a hobby, like just something you were kind of interested in for like telling stories, I suppose.
Yeah, and actually I would say there was a pretty big gap from, you know, because it's not been something that's always been in my life. You know, it was definitely when I was a kid. And
Yeah.
I would say up until probably 18, and there was a little bit of a gap. So I would say sometime in my 20s, I stopped, my early 20s, I stopped messing around with it. I had done some stuff with just a video camera, like in my early 20s. I was probably 20, 21, 22,
Okay.
with Transformers. You know, at the time Transformers had come out, and so I bought a couple of Transformers, and I was just messing
Nice.
around. I was like, I should pick up, I got a camera here, I should pick up stop motion
Get back into
again.
it.
Yeah. And so that was, but it wasn't, it's funny because I didn't even fully understand the concept of like frame by frame, 24 frames a second, you know, even then. And so I was like, I need to make this longer. And so just like, you know, you hit start stop on the record a couple of times. I didn't fully understand the
That concept
even,
wasn't.
yeah, I just would just kind of do it. I'm like, that looks good.
Okay, brilliant.
So yeah, my knowledge of it is a lot more technical now than it was then. So,
Okay.
yeah.
And what was the thing that sort of, you're saying that kind of like a gap in your 20s where say you weren't really as active? What was it that brought you back then to like actually kind of start kind of messing around?
Yeah, it was the Go Rogue competition back in 2016.
Oh, brilliant. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
that was actually what got me back into it. And I was
brilliant.
so
And was
hungry.
this what was this competition like? Was this run by like Disney or Lucasfilm?
Yeah,
or
so this was run by, I believe it was run by Lucasfilm. Though the whole point was that you had to promote, Rogue One was coming out at the time.
Yeah.
And so this was during the summer that they started kind of promoting it, and they released a series of 4 videos that were like part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, and it was guys that had done stop motion, and they used action figures and merchandise from Rogue One to promote the movie.
Oh,
and
brilliant.
So then they were like, hey, on this date it's going to be your turn, and you have a month to submit a movie, and then the winner gets to come out to Lucasfilm or Skywalker Ranch. You get to meet I think Gareth Edwards, the director of Rogue One, you and a friend. You get to see an early screening of Rogue One, and it was a really fun, like,
yeah,
everybody was excited. There's just this buzz in the air, you know. And
I love when they do those competitions.
Yeah,
because I think it's such a good way to, like, you know, not only encourage people to, you know, hype up the film for you, but also it just kind of gets you a bit more invested in it. You know what I mean? If you're having to go out and kind of go, oh, what kind of story can I tell with these characters? And so you were given kind of like a month, and you had to, was there like rules or conditions, like you had to include obviously characters from,
yeah, you had to include merchandise from Rogue One. And so they were like gonna do, you know, do those Force Friday things where they would you know, they release new merchandise, and then it's like a big release. And so so the rules, they had a couple of rules. They give you, like, you basically apply for it. You say, hey, I want to be, and they give you a packet, and it's got, you know, music that they've pre-approved, backdrops if you want to have it superimposed with green screen, and then, you know, just some minor rules, no cursing and stuff like that, you know. It's Star Wars, you know. And so
but that's brilliant that they give you, I love that they give you these kind of, like, you know, some sound packs and some guidelines and some help, because I'd entered 1 or 2 of those competitions. I think they were obviously huge, or I don't know why they've kind of dropped off now that they don't do them, because I remember something similar for when the Lego Batman movie was coming out, because I kind of started with Brick Films, and they were doing these great competitions where it was like all you had to do was include a Batman figure, which nearly every Batman set comes with, so like check, you have one of them,
easy,
and you're like, got that. And then it would just, I think it was 30 seconds, and they either gave you a line that you had to continue, and it could be anything, like loosely based on after this line. But I think 4 winners were going to be picked and included on the actual like DVD of the Lego Batman movie.
Wow.
And it was like hosted or introduced by Will Arnett, who done the voice of Lego Batman. And I was like, geez, for like no money to enter, just these kind of guidelines, and if you have a Batman figure, go for it. And I think it creates such a lovely, positive kind of like build up to the film. I'm always like shocked when they don't do more of these things.
Well, and that was the thing I was fully expecting. I had a bunch more ideas. So I don't know, do you know Brotherhood Workshop?
Yes.
You know? Yeah. So he actually wrote it. Like Kevin Ulrich, I think is his name. He wrote these Go Rogue promotional ones, the first 4.
Oh, I've seen them, because like one is all Lego. I remember.
Yes.
And then
that's the 4th one. Yeah.
The 4th one, brilliant.
Yeah. My favorite are the first 2, because they incorporate everything. They do Black Series, they do 3 3/4, they did Lego, they did Funko Pop. So it was
everything. The Funko Pop. Yeah. It's cool.
Orson Krennic. He's like, and they're trying to build the Death Star and all that stuff.
Oh, brilliant. I didn't know that was all tied in. That's amazing.
Yeah. I've watched those ones a lot, because that was really, like kind of, I was like, well, I want to try and match that as best I can. It won't look quite like it, just because these guys are professionals. Like the animators that were working on it work for Leica and Wes Anderson and his movies and all kinds of stuff.
Okay.
So I was like, these guys are the big leagues, but I wanted to try and
absolutely
as best I can. So, but so it was kind of tricky, because when it went live, I was on vacation, and so, or on holiday, as
what's that? What's a vacation? For our European audiences.
And so so I Force Friday.
Your time was shorter, was it?
So and so I had to build sets, I had to write the script, I had to get everything ready, and I had to kind of look ahead of time. Okay, what action figures are going to come out? What can I write? How can I write this with the minimal amount of figures? Because I'm pressed for time. When I come back, I lost a week, and so everybody else that was in the competition had full month.
Okay.
I had 20 days, and that was.
I love that when you're having to write stuff for specific characters. Well, I just think that really does. Like those limitations, I think, are great for creativity in terms of it's always terrible when you have, oh my God, I've just thought of some really funny moment, and you're like, no, I can't use that character, or it's too much. The scale in your head, you're like, oh no, you have to pare that back. Okay, so you were kind of thinking about this while you were away, so when you come back, you kind of have to hit the ground running,
right? And I had to go to a store where we were staying. And I had to go midnight. I was like, I need these figures, or else this doesn't work.
Okay.
And so I was like, I didn't know.
Sold out. That's it.
Yeah. And I didn't know. I mean, the figures that I wanted were, I was like, okay, Cassian or Jin Urso, those 2 I need, because they're like the main characters. And then K2SO, I didn't know what the demand was going to be for the figures. And so I was like, I need these figures, or else. It turned out that 2 of the figures I needed were peg warmers, and they've been everywhere. Like you can still sometimes find them in some stores.
Okay, but at the time
I didn't know. And so I was like, I need these figures, or else this doesn't work, and
not to derail our holiday, but if I don't get these figures, the holiday's off.
Then it's over. It's ruined, and I will be a terror for the rest of the
Don't go near Jeff. He's in a bad place.
So that was kind of fun though.
I think
the adrenaline rush and the
absolutely. And I it always kind of baffles me why they don't do more of those things, because for me it's kind of a no-brainer. You have people who maybe wouldn't always necessarily buy some merchandise for the thing are going to go out and buy them, and the sort of the online kind of goodwill build up from people, all these different channels, like you said, you're given a month, whereas if you were to kind of make your own Star Wars thing, you probably give yourself a lot more time, like the rest of us. You go, oh, maybe I'll try that for Christmas. So it's great having a deadline and the buzz and the build up. And for stuff like this, do you, because I'm always curious to ask just people's process, like the start of your film, were you scripting and kind of storyboarding this, or because of the time constraints, was it kind of just like, no, I need to just get straight into it?
I'm a very tactile person, from the animation process to the set building to everything. On top of that, I'm very, I storyboard, and it's
Okay.
nothing fancy. I do
Yeah.
them all on Post-its, and then I
Great.
get a big piece of like foam core or cardboard, and then I organize them out. And so a lot of times what I'll do is I'll go, okay, according to what set is going to be used, what I use different highlighter pens, and I'll go, okay, this is going to be set 1 and 2, and I have a little key there to remind me which one
Oh,
is set 1.
brilliant.
Set 1 is pink, set 2 is blue, set 3 is green.
And you've it all mapped out visually.
Yeah, and so then I mark each one, and I go, okay, and then what I do is I go, okay, now that I have it edited and I have all the shots numbered and listed, and then I go, okay, and then I kind of pre-edit the thing, and I go, okay, well, I'm going to move all these together and do these first because they require the most. And then
Brilliant.
I can, and that's typically the way a film set works anyways. They start wide because that requires the most resources, and they slowly whittle it down to close-ups, and so, I usually end up doing the close-ups last because I want those to be the best animation. And I'm kind of warmed up at that point. And,
I love that.
so like, okay.
That's quite a nice, unique, kind of process, because I think for me, and it's so great hearing people's like kind of different takes on these things. Whenever I'm setting up a film, I think I'm always a little bit more conscious of the lighting and stuff, and I'm always worried, just a terrible worrier whenever I'm filming. I'm always like, oh, will I be able to get that same lighting? Like I take pictures of the lights that I've taken, I'm like, okay, I'll just get the close-up now. So a lot of the time, even though it's more work, I'm kind of filming chronologically. Like obviously, if the set has to spin around, like I'm doing a reverse shot, I'm not going to spin it each time. But I kind of tend to have the other approach where I'm like, oh, I'm worried about the lighting. But I love that you're working from kind of, and it makes sense because from the wide down to the close-ups, I love the idea of you warming up animation wise, so that when you get to the close-ups, you're kind of like primed, and you've had a few testers. Okay, brilliant. And when you so you would you like script it out as in like write out like classic sort of cell text or blah 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 script?
It's a full on with log lines and everything. I prefer to do it that way. That's just what works best for me. Is I need it to be an actual script. I need it to, and then usually what I'll do from there is I'll kind of break down the script, and that process is different for everybody. But typically, so it's usually a script and storyboard for me. And sometimes I'll get an idea for a storyboard. I'll see a shot, and that will spark a full script.
Wow.
That's kind of what happened with Tall Tale. Go Rogue Tall Tale was just, it was like a spark of an idea, a shot, and then it was like a snowball effect.
Okay, brilliant. So now I know obviously with this film, there's obviously that time constraint. So you're working towards this month, kind of, you have a very specific deadline. Right. So when you had the script done and the storyboard, like in between that, are you kind of testing any animation or starting the sets, or do you wait till you're fully finished the storyboards before you do any of that?
Well, in this case, I'm all for animation tests. And in this case, it was more about, I'm a little rusty because I haven't really full on done, stop motion in a while. And so I was like, okay, well, let's just prime the pump. Let's just start. I'm just going to start animating stuff. And so I posted a lot of that, on my Instagram, just to kind of as fun. I was like, whatever, like put it out there. And so it was just a lot of like, my Spider-Man action figure, or I had a little Batmobile. I had, some other Star Wars. I have tons of Star Wars action figures, and so I just mess around with those. And
a healthy amount. And your Instagram account is brilliant for, like, that's what I've always loved, almost as much as people's films, is kind of seeing their process. And I think your process is very well documented in that sense. Not only your kind of test stuff, but your set building and stuff. And I love like seeing that. I think there's a whole community out there who almost sometimes appreciates the behind the scenes almost more. because you're getting to see, you know, all the effort and work that goes into it. It's not just something you show up on the day and go, oh, I've had this idea, boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, there it is.
There's a lot
it's
of
all
build
there.
Up. Yeah.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot. Well, thank you. And there's a lot of, I think there's also definitely a draw to, there's a lot of action figure photographers out there who build dioramas. And so that, I think they appreciate the stuff that I've done as well, because it gives them ideas. And I have a buddy of mine who's an action figure photographer, and he, you know,
wow, what an amazing job.
Yeah, well, but it's a side thing, kind of like what we do.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I
was gonna say awesome. Full time is like that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Can you imagine that becoming more as like, just, you know, the 9 to 5, the grind,
shoot action figures, no big deal. You know, yeah. And so he, you know, he's definitely really gotten into, you know, my sets. And there's even so much I don't post. You know, it's like I'll take pictures with the intention of posting, and then, you know, life gets in the way and I get distracted, and then months go by and I look and I'm like, I haven't posted in a long time.
Yeah,
and I'm like, I look through my photos. I'm like, oh yeah, I was gonna post this and this and this and this and this. You know,
sometimes.
And so it's just.
Do you ever get that where you feel like sometimes, you know, your photos have to be building to something? Like sometimes I have, you know, set photos that I'm really happy of, you know, really proud of, and I think, oh, maybe I'll share this, and it's either a film that just hasn't, like, nothing ever came of it. So I'm like, oh, I'm almost treating myself like a mini marketing company where I'm like, I can't put out a poster for a film that doesn't exist. And you're like, well, why not? You know what I mean? Like, it's all, you spent work on it, but small party is like, no, maybe I'll just hang on to that.
Yeah, I all the time. That
for whatever reason.
Yeah, and it's so funny because it's like there's a picture that I think is cool, and I'll want to send, you know, but like, oh no, like people, you always think you need to be building for something, building something. I'm like, I have been so busy, I have not animated, but I have been working on this aspect of it. You know, and I'm like, but people won't care because they want to see, you know, and it's so weird how you edit things in your head that way, where you're like,
you have this inner monologue where you're like, I always picture it like, you know, the Inside Out kind of gang in your head, just having
totally.
Like, we can't put a photo out with no
Don't
film.
be ridiculous. Like, yeah.
And can I ask for this project, Go Rogue, what kind of camera and software were you using?
Oh my goodness. Okay. So this is a testament to necessity being the mother of invention, because at the time my wife and I just moved, and, you know, we were tight on money, and you know, like moving was expensive, and so I didn't have a tripod. I didn't have a camera. I really didn't have anything. It was my phone. I was like, you know what? No excuses. I was like, this phone it was an iPhone 6 Plus at the time, or so this is a couple, you know, 5 years ago. And it was like the filmmakers that I really look up to, they had Super 8 cameras, and and what I have now is better than that. And I was like, I have no excuses. And I was like, what can I do? What can I do? Let's be proactive. Let's be, you know, optimistic. Let's be a little optimistic here.
Yeah.
And so I looked up and I found, it was called Stop Motion Studio Pro on iPhone.
I know it well.
Yeah. And not a great program, but I have Dragon Frame now, which is way better.
I think when you look at a comparison, but in fairness, for something that, like, exactly like you said with the kind of Super 8 thing, it's almost like the equivalent for, like, say, the modern world, a phone and an app, because it's something that everybody has, you know. And if you're a kid and you don't have a phone, your parents have probably multiple phones or tablets and stuff. I think Stop Motion Studio has a free one as well. I know there's limitations to it, but even the paid one is like $5. And when you think about it, can edit, you can toggle, you can put on onion skin. I think as a leaping off point, like when you talk about, you know, your earlier work where you're having to micro punch record on a camera, I mean, it's come on leaps and bounds, you know what I mean, where you can all this software in an app.
But when you have limitations like that, it forces you to be creative. And so my tripod became, I had a controller mount, or a phone mount for my PlayStation 4 controller. So I was like, okay, I can mount that on there. And I was like, what's a little top heavy? Okay, I've got I can take game cases and movie cases and wrap rubber bands, no joke, rubber bands around the game controller so that it doesn't fall over, and I'll clamp that to my table, and if I need a little higher, I'll remove a game case, I'll tilt it a little bit, and that, honestly, that's what I used. And I was able to, I realized, so when I was before I actually started shooting or animating for Tall Tale, and I was doing all those little tests and just fun little animations. If you go far enough back on my Instagram, you can see them. I was just using the app, but then I actually doing some research. I was like, if I buy the desktop version or the phone, which actually, it's interchangeable. So if I buy the phone version, I can install it on my computer, and basically I can use my phone as a remote camera and control it from my computer. And that'll actually be really nice, because then I can get myself into a little bit better angles. And
because I was going to ask, I know that the phone, even though as great as it is slightly problematic that you're having to physically touch the screen to take a photo. And naturally that can cause the camera to
that's what I didn't want. So
you'd found that before you actually started filming.
I did a lot of research, and I was like, okay, this is going to be the best. And then it was just it was desk lamps. And I think even when I was on holiday or vacation, wherever you're from listening to this, we went to this, it was like an antique store, or not quite an antique store. It was like a flea market thing or something. And I found another light that could clamp, and it was just this junker light, but I was like, this will be good. I can clamp this to the chairs. I can, get this into other positions.
So you got that.
And it was like, it was like really cheap. It was like $1. It was like,
oh wow, jeez, yeah.
£1 or whatever, where we're from. £1.
I'm liking
euro.
this very worldly translation.
I'm trying to be international here.
Nice.
And so it was just 2 lamps, and that was it. So it was like a key light and a fill light, depending on the scene. And then I think I just used a couple of odds and ends, like a flashlight or something if I needed a little bit more fill, or I needed a rim lighter. There wasn't a whole lot of thought that came into it. The most important thing is I just didn't want shadows on my backdrop. That was like,
you just want it well lit. You didn't need a stylized lighting. It just needed
especially because I was in such a time crunch. I kind of needed to just allow good enough to be the benchmark. Hey, this is good enough.
Because you can tinker too much. There's so many shots I've done where I think I've ended up with more test shots, because Dragon Frame allows you to take test shots. 300 test shots, and the scene is an 80 frame scene, and you're like, why did I? And I, more often than not, I end up going back to the first few test shots. You're
it's like just trusting your gut,
you're like, just go with the first one. You have saved yourself a lot of time. And that's brilliant, obviously, because you had the desktop version, you're using your phone as the kind of remote capture. You're probably able to see the display a lot better than, obviously, if you were trying to judge the lighting from a phone, it's smaller, and you could probably miss things, whereas you're seeing it kind of full screen. So like you said, if you need a little extra fill, it's a flashlight or something like that. And one thing that's always kind of stood out to me from your Instagram account in particular is your set design. I feel like that's something that you really pour maybe more time than the animation into the set stuff, which is something I really appreciate, because for me, building sets is one of the big kind of joys of making these animated films, is kind of like finding these materials and stuff like that. And where does that come from? Like where do you have that kind of love for set design?
That's a really good question. I think as a kid, I always loved tinkering, would always take things apart, and my imagination would soar. I'd be like, oh, this kind of looks like the S foil of an X-wing. Wait a minute, if I get 3 more of these and I do this, and I've got an X-wing, I don't need to go buy one. And so I think that's kind of where it started. And then just sort of built from there. And just, I'm very kind of like almost like a mimic in a way, where where I can watch something and go, I can do that,
Yeah,
and then
I
I
can
just
make a
start,
version of that.
I just start doing it, and
Brilliant.
you learn a lot, and so the
And did
current
you have any
project
kind of background in like, doing any of these kind of courses or anything like that? Like, had you ever done any kind of
in
set designing or art?
school, in school. So from, let's see, how old would I have been? Basically multiple times from the age of 13 to 18, I was in wood shop classes
Okay,
in
brilliant.
school.
Your stuff kind of reminds me of, when you see like an architect planning stuff out, that you get that kind of paper version first. I
Yeah.
don't know if it was for Go Rogue or the new one you're working on, Bad Motivator, but you have this really nice shot of a kind of a low ceiling, and it's like a paper version of it. And then the next photo you released was like the actual wooden set, and then you're showing
Yeah.
it being lit. And I could pour over those photos where I'm like, oh, look, I wonder what that material is. Or
well,
oh, sorry, did you ever like look up kind of tutorials for these things, or is this something that you're just kind of like experimenting with, like, oh, I'll try this material, or I'll try this?
It really was just experimentation. It was okay. Some of it was okay. What do I have access to? Okay.
Yeah.
And I don't know if people over in Europe have and in Ireland have like craft stores where you can go and you can get like styrofoam balls and all kinds of stuff. But here in the States, we do, and we have hobby stores. So like model building, stores, and we have a lot of that kind of stuff. And so I can spend hours in there.
Yeah.
And
you always end up coming out with more than you actually went in for.
Oh yeah. I'm
what
like,
did I go in there for again?
I need foam core. I need foam core, and I come out with like $70 worth of stuff.
You have to limit yourself. But
I bought a foam cutter. No. I have to explain it to my wife. No, but you understand, like, no, I'll totally use this a lot. And I actually do, but
just at the time you feel that extra pressure. No, we definitely have they'd be more specialized over here. I think model shops in particular, there's only really kind of a handful left.
Same here.
Like actual authentic, that's all they do. There's sections of kind of bigger toy shops that have like, an Airfix modeling section or something, but nothing to the scale of like, I think we've one or two big kind of like purpose for like hobbyists and professionals where you can buy your foam card and your styrofoam and all that stuff. But it wouldn't be like a kind of a pound store or something like that where you can go down and it's just like, oh, I'll pick up these bits. You kind of have to, I suppose your brain's always looking, because there's a lot of like these shops where you go, ooh, like all these lollipop sticks. You're like, that could be wooden. That could be a wooden floor.
And it's I have like a couple of bins at home that are for storage, and they're completely reserved for bits and bobs for like, oh, this could be cool for this thing or something like that. And so I'm always looking, even if I don't have a project going or I have no intent, no use for it currently. I'm like, well, I'll have a use for it.
Or creative hoarding. Where you're like, there's sections of we rent at the moment, but we have like a concrete shed down the back, and I have like bags of stuff down there that just wouldn't fit in the house anymore. And I've had it for so long, maybe 5-6 years, and I'm like, I feel bad throwing it out now.
And I do actually, I talk about, I'll share a lot of that stuff on my Instagram as well. Like, hey, this was from an LED light that you
just repurposed kind of.
And I instantly, my mind is, I'm a big fan of like the behind the scenes, or not behind the scenes, like the visual guides and the cross sections of Star Wars. And so I have like tons of books, and I'll sit there and just look over them over and over and over and over again, and all the little tiny details. And so I'm always just thinking about, okay, well, and especially with my current project, I needed a junkyard, and I was like, I don't want to just throw stuff in there. People are like, oh, that's a thing, and this is I know exactly what that is. I wanted it to look, some of it to have a unique silhouette, but to be completely fabricated, like
Okay.
Star Wars space junk, you know?
Yeah.
And so that was a lot of fun.
Because I loved even
Looking,
the straws, I think that you spray painted metallic,
yeah.
you know, for like piping and stuff. And
Uh-huh.
it's, I think one of the great kind of like, I suppose goals, and I don't know if you agree when you're doing sets, is like you want to make something that looks like custom built and
Mm-hmm.
looks like, you know, the thing you're going for, be it like a radiator or whatever. But you want to be able to say to someone, oh, you know, that's actually, you know, bottle caps stacked together and wrapped in something, and someone goes, oh wow, I can see it now. But at the time,
Yeah.
it's not. I know what you mean. You don't want to just, you know, chop the top off a bottle, roll it into the scene and go, oh, there's a cylinder, and you're like, everyone's
Uh-huh.
just going, that's a Coke bottle.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
it just
exactly.
pulls you out of it then.
Yeah, and trying to just some of it just would have taken too much time to disguise, but I would say 8 out of 10 times I do try to disguise it as much as I can.
Yeah.
But I'm like, what else can I put on here that's gonna break up the silhouette a little bit,
It's
but
all
is
the
gonna
little detail, isn't it, that really makes the set. Like, because
right.
sometimes you can make the, you know, the flooring, the walls, and you have, say, a building, but it's that extra work, I think, when you start to get into it. And I've noticed it in your kind of current sets, you know, it's even like little wall dividers coming out, all that stuff that takes hours longer than if you just done a flat wall, you'd be like, done. But
Yeah,
it's very boring.
it
Whereas when you're
is.
adding in all these extra details, all of a sudden you're looking at that set going like, wow, you're there's so many things to look at. It's not just
Yeah.
one glance and you're done. You're kind of,
Yeah, one like that's been the big thing is because you know my wife and I are going to move you know sometime in the near future, and we've kind of decided, you know, we can't take these sets with us, you know, which is
okay.
definitely lights a fire underneath me to finish animating
Yeah.
it, so at least the animation is done, you know. But the animation process for me is very it's it's kind of a painful process. Some
Okay.
people love to animate.
Mm,
I do, but also there's a part of me that's like, it takes a lot out of me. I'm really, really tired
okay.
after the fact. I love everything in between, you know,
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
script process, storyboarding, set building, even lighting. I love,
Yeah.
you know, setting up the cameras, but then the actual animating process, because it takes me so long. Um,
It can wear you down a little
oh,
bit.
it really does wear me down. And so I
Okay.
think that that's been a lot of like, you know, not allowing myself to get psyched up, you know,
Yeah.
to like, oh, okay, here we go, here we go. No, just like shutting that part of my brain off and just doing it
Yeah.
is works a lot better for me.
Would
You
you say
know,
with the action figures? Because I think what's been great about this podcast so far is that like all the people that I've spoken to, it's been such a mixed variety of stop motion. So I've had, you know, someone who's worked with Lego, someone with clay, someone who's kind of mostly kind of a paper computer hybrid process sort of
uh-huh.
process, and then obviously yourself with action figures. Do you have to like, are you using any supports for them, or is it very tough to balance them?
That's a good question. I use sticky tack, and I'll use, yeah, sometimes I'll use, if it's like a, you know, medium shot and you're not going to see the legs,
Yeah.
I'll do something that's a little bit more stabilizing from the
Okay.
waist down.
Mm,
I prefer to animate with Black Series figures because they're, you know, 6 inches, you know, they're a lot bigger, and I'm a big dude, you know, and I have huge hands. And so
okay.
right
So
now
the
I'm
nimble,
working with,
like,
yeah, I'm working with 3 3/4 inch, and I'm working with Jawas and droids, which are
okay.
half
That's
the
all.
size. And so for me, it's like I have such a respect for people that are do brick film and
Yeah.
do it at, you know, they shoot in ones. So it's 24 frames in
Yeah.
24 seconds. I shoot in twos because I found that that actually works a lot better for me. And
Yeah. Same with me. It's
yeah,
just
because it's just
my style.
it
And
is half the time.
yeah,
And
that's
you
the
know,
big
like,
thing as well.
yeah,
You know,
it's
you
just like,
always, your fancy answer is, oh, you know, just, it's more, you know, this highlights my style better. And you're like, it's also half the time. That's
yeah,
like, you kind
yeah.
of put that.
And Go Rogue Tall Tale was shot in ones, and that was before I
Oh,
knew you
wow.
could shoot in twos.
Okay.
And so that just goes to show how much I've learned, like even in the past 5 years. Just a lot of it is because I want, and I was listening to, you know, the director James Gunn, Guardians of
Yes.
the Galaxy, you know,
Yeah.
Suicide Squad. He was talking before the first Guardians came out. He was talking about films, and he said, and he said, I I do films because I feel compelled to. I have to. Not
Okay.
he's like, he's like one of those people that's like so electrified by the film process. I mean, he does get in that place, obviously, but it always starts from this compulsion to tell the story. And for me, that's where it is. It's like with Go Rogue, it was, oh, this will be fun to kind of, it was more out of necessity. I was like, I just need to do something creative.
Yeah.
Because I'd kind of gone through like a creative drought for a couple of years prior to that. And all of a sudden I felt this spark of inspiration and I had to do it. And then that kind of birthed Bad Motivator, which is my current project, where it was like, stop motion is the only way I can do this story.
It's a perfect outlet for your creativity.
Exactly. Yeah. And so for me, it's just been that process, because my heart is in live action, but who knows, like I could end up just Bad Motivator could open up an opportunity
Absolutely.
to work for an animation house when I was like begrudgingly doing it, but I honestly, I say all this very kind of comically, like I really do love the process. I think that it's a really, really special medium to where the reward of a finished product, you just feel so good about yourself when you do it. You're like,
and you've designed like everything in there. You know what I mean? Like I think one of the big draws for me with stop motion is you can do it very minimally. Like you can do a style where, a Micro Machines car is driving on your kitchen table and you can leave everything in the shot. And, there's some phenomenal examples of that on YouTube where it's all very, just laid out. But then you can also pour into the detail of, like you said, there's some brick filmers who've designed these amazing sets out of Lego where you're like, holy God, even just that set, how they built that and designed it must have taken weeks, let alone the animation. But I think stop motion has so many aspects. For me personally, I would say the animation side of things is probably my weaker side in terms of I don't have super fluid movements. And I do find that I try to shoot things in a way that's the least amount of animation possible. Like if I get away with a mid shot. Whereas I think one of the things I love is the set design and the lighting and just the writing of the ideas. Whereas I know there's some YouTubers out there who, they great animators, but they just don't have an interest in set design. So if they have a blank wall, well, that's the Death Star then. It's just a dark blank wall. Whereas, maybe the likes of you and me would be like, no, I want to spend the time to make those cylindrical bars.
It needs to be immersive. And so like even with Bad Motivator, there was and actually a little bit, this really started with Tall Tale, to be completely honest. It's a lot smaller, but it's that little cantina bar at the beginning and ends when they they're spinning the yarn and they're telling that crazy story. The table actually has a cylinder in the middle and it's lit. It's actually there's a light,
a practical light with that from
LED
below.
lights in there.
Wow.
And
brilliant.
They provided a little bit of ambient light. It's still a little too dark, and so there's some diffusion paper on the window, and that's shining some light in. And then, but I wanted it to feel very ambient and that kind of informed.
I was going to ask, with that set, the walls, what was the material on the walls made of?
Oh yeah, that was so at the time I worked for there's a famous store here in America called Trader Joe's, and it's a grocery store, but it's a little more highbrow, I guess. And it's and so I used to get a lot of boxes from them, and so it was a box for avocados, and then I cut it out and just kind of glued it so that it was like a little booth. And then the table was like a pill bottle flipped upside down that was spray painted and had some zip ties that were around it to kind of create a nice little like ribbing on the outside.
Oh wow. Love that.
And then it was just like a little clear hose that I got from a hardware store, and then I took some LED lights and put them in the inside. And but the walls but the walls were like spackling that you use, like it's like on walls for texture.
So
it comes in like a paste, and there's one here in America that's like it when you open it up it's pink but it dries white, and so
you can get nice textures out of it.
yeah, I kind of just rubbed it on the walls and then, sanded it down a little bit here and there and then spray painted it. And
it's so effective for that kind of sandy, Mos Eisley, Tatooine type, like vibe. That once I saw that, because a flat wall, even though painted the right color, would be, fine, but that kind of texture is very like sand planet in Star Wars.
Yeah,
like, as soon as you see
gives
that,
it a
you're
little
like,
extra something.
yeah, which is great. Okay, that's cool. And then
Yeah.
I was going to ask specifically, because I just, from watching through the film, there's a cool shot where you have a character looking through binoculars, and then that effect, was that like was that something that you used like with an editing package, or how did you do that binocular effect?
Yeah, that was actually, it's kind of funny. It was like one of the last shots I did, and it was like, I need something else, because I tend to edit in my head, whether it's a live action thing or a stop motion, whatever. I tend to edit scenes in my head and try to think of everything that I'm going to need. And that was like the last thing I was like, I need a POV shot. And so, yeah, it was that one. Actually, I remember I broke ranks and I just did it with the phone. I didn't use the desktop because a lot of my stuff was kind of put away. And I was like, and so I was looking through Stop Motion Studio on my phone. I was like, is there a preset in here for binoculars? And I was like, and bingo.
Okay, brilliant. That's so lucky.
And then it was like, and then I was like, oh, and I can even throw on this filter that makes it kind of look like,
oh, that was all in the app
or whatever.
I saw that.
Yeah,
that was amazing.
And so, like, thankfully I didn't have to do any kind of, anything. What I would have done if I didn't have that option is I would have just done it normally animated, and I just kind of moved my phone around, and I just did it like quick and dirty, really. Like, I just rested my hand on something. Yeah. And I was just like, boom, 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 boom,
Brilliant.
boom, boom, and
it really works. Like, it sells, and like,
yeah,
especially the graininess. It's very, I always laugh at that moment when I think about it in Phantom Menace, where it's Darth Maul and he's looking through the binoculars, and you're like, there's something so grainy and low tech about it. Like, it's
I know,
so futuristic, this world, but these ones that he has, I was like, obviously Sith have skimped on high tech stuff.
Clearly.
It's just like very grainy, almost
low light quality.
Yeah. Like, you know what? We put all the money into your double-headed lightsaber. There was nothing else for binoculars.
Do you know how much money that cost us? Yeah.
You can have this or the binoculars. You can't have
brilliant. So that was it. That was,
because I love one of the things that I really liked about your film, the Tall Tale, is when you see through that binocular effect, and it's so clever and so simple, but you obviously have like different scale kind of vehicles, like between particularly the AT-ATs, and I love that sense of scale that you get from the two different sizes, where it really does feel like there's a huge depth to your set. Because I'm always when I'm looking at these things, I'm always trying to figure out, okay, how big is that actual set? Because the one I work off is in a wardrobe in my spare bedroom.
Yeah.
So it's very small, and it's trying to make the most of that space. And I love later on in the film, then when they actually get to the things and you have Jin spinning around the little chicken walk. And like, was that something that like was deliberate from the start, that you had in your head you wanted to do that, or how did you get to that?
Yeah. So that actually was the genesis of the whole project, was me going before. So again, I had to do all the work, the pre-production, before I went on holiday, so that I could get, I could just get going. So I was like, I need to know exactly what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And the only thing that's going to change is that while I'm on holiday, I'm going to get Jin Erso, Cassian, and K2SO. Okay. And then I'm going to, and Rebels was going on at the time. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll throw Rebels, the character of Kanan in there too, just as kind of a nondescript character. And so I borrowed my friend's action figure of Kanan because he had him and I didn't. And so I laid everything out. I was just like tinkering and looking around at all my different, vehicles and action figures. And I was like, okay, what can how much I wanted to use as much as possible stuff I already had that felt like it was on brand for Rogue One before the, because I didn't want to buy every single piece of merchandise that they're selling, and so
tempting.
I was
but
like,
no,
there definitely was a little bit of, oh no, honey, no, I think it'd be really great to have this character in the background and this character too. It would really sell it. She's like, fine.
I know we were meant to go for dinner, but
yeah.
how about I just get this? I don't.
You're gonna have to be hungry because I need these. And so yeah, so it was looking at them, and then I remember I had the chicken walker and I had some of the AT-ATs laying out at different scale sizes, and then I kind of got this like chuckle, and I was thinking about, I was like, wouldn't it be funny if they're like telling a story about how they took on the Empire, and it kind of is set up like it looks like, you know, they're, you know, this imposing force and their different scales, and that I'm, you know, typically when you do animation, you would use different scales to simulate distance. And so I was really playing into that. And then and then I was like, and then I set a larger action figure next to him, and that was like, boom, that was the spark where I'm like, oh, it'd be really funny if you think that it's just like imposing force, and all of a sudden they show up and they're not.
It's very wacky. Like, I loved it's almost like, you know, when you see in a film where someone like leans against what they think is a real thing and it's a cardboard set and it goes, I love just seeing her like run around with it, because I think your first indication that it might be something is, I think you see a character run past and he's like twice the size of an AT-AT, and I was like thinking, oh, have I missed seeing something here? It's like just a little bit of a trick. And then when you see Jin like full on spinning in the miniature, I love that. I thought that was great.
That's great. Yeah. And it's funny too, because again, if you I wanted to minimize the amount of like running and walking animations I had to do. And so a lot of it's very minimal in that regard. And then like even with like Jin and Cassian, there's like a shot of them running and it's like a close-up and they're like this,
and it's like the background,
like rocks.
I moved that
rocks, you know, just to simulate, because I was like, I am not going to try and have these characters walk. And then also there's no blasters fired at all. If you notice, like it's all,
I never actually thought of that.
People throwing things at each other, because I was like, that's going to take way too long.
I don't have the time, but I do love, I love that it's true of all animation, but I love it particularly with stop motion, that there's something like so like tangible about the fact that you, just by holding these two things together, had an idea that was sparked from literally holding these things, and then you bring it in, and there's always shortcuts. I think the tough thing about the walk cycle is it's by far the most complicated thing to do, especially when you're talking about multiple characters, and no one ever goes, wow, that was a great walk cycle.
I know.
Like
no one does.
That film was great, but talk about that walk cycle. And like,
have you
if
seen
you do
the
it
walks?
badly, people are like, oh geez, the characters didn't walk great. So you're like, there's no way. It's like a lose. So you're like, okay, shoot them from the waist and just move the
well, and there's even like a shot where somebody, you know, like it's like the rebel force, and I just had him, I was like, I'm not gonna have this guy run off the set, I'm gonna have him do cartwheels off the set, because that's like point of contact, you know, that was super easy, and it just kind of like goes like this, and then there's a cartwheel, you know, and I was like, easy done. It looks great and it's wacky and fun.
It does. It really works with the whole thing. It really does.
My current project is a little different, where I'm trying to be mindful, because walking is hard as is, but then the smaller it is for me, the more difficult it gets. And so, especially when you have like, it's small, it's 3 3/4 inch, but you also have multiple points of articulation, so you have to move those. It just is tough. So for me, I'm still running into the situation where I'm like, okay, I want to honor the scale of my production, and there's going to be some compositing and stuff like that for some wider shots, but how can I minimize the amount of walking without looking like I'm minimizing that? Because it just takes so much time, and it's like I'm dealing with like I have sand troopers and I've got all kinds of stuff, and you know, trying to like make them feel like an imposing force, but you know what I mean? Like it's just
a trade-off.
It's a lot of mental gymnastics of like re-editing shots, changing shots, and constantly reevaluating.
That's completely fair. Just to try and find that balance. Absolutely. And one thing I noticed from Tall Tale was the kind of the voice acting that you had in it. Is that something that because I know it's such a tricky thing sometimes, because you have these characters, you know, that have very established voices in some cases, and then you're also, you know, you don't want to do all the voices yourself, because for me anyway, I've gotten over it now, but there used to be a definite point where I used to cringe every time I'd hear my voice. And I was like, I have to ask other people to do it.
Yeah.
Is that something that like you were getting people to record like separately and send you, or did you have like, because I noticed you have a great mic there. Did you have people up to like record them like physically, or how did you do that?
So with Tall Tale, it was all me,
Okay.
except for Jin Ursa. That was my sister. And I had her come over and do it. But with typically I prefer not to do it, not because I cringe, but because I want the credits to actually be credits, not just, craft services provided by Jeff Tharp, written by Jeff Tharp, set designed by Jeff Tharp, Trooper 1, Jeff Tharp, Trooper 2, Jeff Tharp.
It's so tough, isn't it? Because you're like, you don't want to just have nothing at the end. But then when you put up something, you're like, I don't want this just to be a big, like, ego flattering, like, basically everything. Just like your name stays in place, only the job descriptions are changing.
Yeah.
Like,
so there will be some of that, but with the voice acting in particular, this go around with my next project, I've gotten voice actors, like some of them are friends, but are actually really good at voice acting. Some they're all people I know, but like one of my friends who's doing one of the recordings right now for me is an actual actress down in Los Angeles. I paid her, and so it was she's got a great voice. And so
I find a little bit of healthy pressure in terms of I've asked these people to record for it, and now I have their voices, and the shame of someone going to you, oh hey, how's that thing coming on that I recorded for? And you're like, I have to do that even for them.
It's coming along.
Turns out we didn't press record, so we'll have to get it again.
That has happened to me before. Actually, what I ran into is one of my voice actors came in and I had him re-record some lines because it's a conversation between because Bad Motivator definitely is very in the spirit of Tall Tale. I actually thought of Bad Motivator while I was preparing to do Tall Tale.
Okay. Brilliant.
And so it's definitely in the spirit of just very fun and silly and charm. It's got charm.
Star Wars lends itself to that so much. You know what I mean? That kind of adventure, escapism, and just not taking itself too seriously. Even though it's got some very serious characters in there, but it's a nice, escapism.
I agree. Yeah. But so what I ran into was I had there was one character that I was looking to this exchange between two sand troopers, and I was trying to get the tone right, and I had rewritten it so many times, and then finally I met this guy who is has a really unique personality. He's got a great laugh, and I was like, and he was really excited about my project, and he was like, hey, let me know if I can be a voice. Let me know. Hey, do you need this or that? Do you need, and he would like come over and like bring over like odds and ends from work because he's an electrician. And he was like, what about this? Do you think you could use this? And I was like, yes.
Amazing.
And so I was like, I gotta put him in the movie. Like he's so excited.
And such enthusiasm for it.
Yeah. And he had voiced interest in just wanting to do voiceover work anyways. And so I was like, cool. Okay. And so I had him come in, and that kind of informed the other character. And so I had the guy that had originally recorded come back in to record some pickup lines, not romantic pickup lines.
That's lost in translation.
I realized how that sounded. For those that know what pickup lines are. And
that's a good side note.
Yeah. And so I'd recorded him. He did great. And then all of a sudden I was compiling the audio and I couldn't find it. And it could very well be in some weird file. But I need to have him come back a third time and re-record those lines again because so it happens. It's
absolutely. I've been there, but I think there is something there's something so nice about having other people do it. And I found like as a community in general, like stop motion has been great, but also just like family and friends, I've loved almost like your films become like a mini time capsule because there's a person that that their voice is always there. And I think people get a real kick out of, especially people who maybe don't necessarily work in that industry, but you know, most people love movies, they're aware of them, and then the idea of getting to bring life to a character just by lending your voice, I think is something very kind of positive. And I know it's just a good spirited.
They've been immortalized.
And it's also, it's an incredible ask when someone, you know, you go to someone and go, hey, would you do a voice for my movie? You feel a bit like, okay, yeah, sure. Talk to my agent. And, you know, like, it's not a bad thing. I mean, if someone says no, it's probably just out of nerves, or like, oh, I wouldn't really be comfortable. And you're like, fair enough, but it's still a great compliment to be asked. So
sure. Yeah. And I think that's been one of my favorite things, is actually working with actors, and you know, whether they're professional, whether they're there because you asked them to be in this project, you know, whatever the case may be. You know, to me, it's really, really fun, especially when, even if they're not on a professional level, that what they might bring, or the way they read a line,
it can be quite different. Yeah,
go,
I love that.
I got an idea. And I love collaboration. Cool. The process of doing Bad Motivator has been, obviously the animation process has been a painful process for me, but you know, and having to stop and start because I animate in a common area of my home. And so if we have visitors, I need to pack everything up. I need to put it away.
Okay, that's
tough. Especially if they stay here with us, I need to put it away. You know, and so having to like tear everything down, put it back up, you know, and psyching yourself up to do that process again.
Yeah. That's tough. That's a bit of a hill to climb then. Absolutely. You know,
but
can I ask, with your voices, just before we move on, because I'm conscious of time, do you kind of record them before you do the animation, in terms of like, are you doing like rough scratch tracks yourself, or do you get the actual people in to do the voices before you even start animating?
Right. Yeah. So it depends. I would say largely I record before.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, because they end up informing, especially in this case with Bad Motivator, the actors have actually informed how I'm going to animate them.
Yes.
Where it's not, you know, it's in subtle ways, but at the same time, like, ooh, I love the emphasis they put on that line. It would be great if the character did this, you know, while they
emphasize that. You know, I know what you mean. It's subtle. It's not like a William Shatner, like, you know, level, like, oh my God. And you're like, okay, I'm going to move them over. You're like, so no, that's great.
Yeah. So but with Tall Tale, I recorded just about everything in post. And so that was a little difficult.
Because you're having to kind of match, you almost have to sort of edit what you've written to fit the animation, don't you? Because I used to do that with my brick films, where, you know, I was kind of voicing them in my head as I went through, but then afterwards I found that, I haven't really left enough space for that long sentence, so I'm gonna have to trim that. And you're kind of having to shoehorn your lines in to fit. Whereas it's not that it's wrong to do, but it makes a lot more work. And I don't think you can be as creative then. You have to just kind of fit it in.
So with like Stop Motion Studio Pro, and even the free one, I believe you can actually take lines and put them over. So as you animate it, it reveals more. And I think I'd done that. I realized that when I was at the tail end of the
as normally happens.
Like which was like, oh, this would have been nice to
this would have been so handy.
So you know, and even like the animation process, if you look at, like, I would say even now my animating skills when animating dialogue have improved greatly, to where letting the animation breathe a little bit. Like before, with like, while I was animating with the dialogue, I was like, they need to be moving in every single frame. I need to move them. So if you look, they're kind of shaky, a little more shaky than I would like.
Yes.
Whereas like now when I'm animating, I did this through watching a lot of like Robot Chicken, and even just like the Go Rogue, you know, promo
the series and
shorts that they did. Watching those informed me a little bit, when like, no, it's okay to let them breathe, you know. And I like take, you know, like they don't have to be moving in every
single frame,
you know. And that's such a great point itself to allowing for a little bit more like
emphasis. Because even when we naturally talk, you're not moving all the time. Yes, your mouth is, but you're not with your body. I think sometimes when you don't have control, at action figure and Lego level, you're not moving mouths. So you feel like you almost have to like mime it through the body. Whereas sometimes that can come across as too much, but it's so interesting that you have to go through that experience like with you, and then come out the other side and start watching other animations with that in mind. And I know we've spoken a little bit about Bad Motivator as we've kind of been going through this.
Yeah.
And can I just ask briefly about, because I think the poster you got designed for it is absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
I remember when I saw that come out, I can't remember if it was on your Instagram, but I know it's on your kind of as your YouTube icon. And was that someone someone you knew that you got to design that, or who did you get? It was,
yeah. It's a good friend of mine who's a really, really talented artist. His name is Micah Brown, and he had been kind of moving into the vein of experience. He'd been doing a lot of fan posters.
Cool.
And I'm actually going to task him with doing one that's that same poster but pulled out a little bit when I'm actually done with, because at the time I had him do that and I was like, well, I was about ready. I had already started animating, and that was at my last job.
So
and
it felt like it was
actually
in motion.
going like before that new job had presented itself. I was going, I think it was 2018. I was going to finish animating and premiere during the winter of around December of 2018. And then I got a new job, and that threw everything.
Because I remember seeing that poster and I was blown away, because I was like, Jesus, you have like the production value has gone like through the roof. I was like, have you gotten some crazy millionaire funding or something like that? Because the poster looked incredible. And I remember you shared one or two kind of like little set designs of it. And I mean, I'm still very excited to see it. And I fully appreciate that life gets in the way, sometimes.
So it will get done, especially it would be too much of a tragic story to move, have to get rid of those sets and never having finished. Like I honestly I would become very depressed as a result of that.
I was going to say,
so
this would be a movie. Yeah. This would be old Jeff Tharp looking back.
Yeah.
My one regret.
My one regret was never finishing Bad Motivator. Yeah. So
surrounded by loved ones being like, oh well, okay, great.
Yeah. All right. I don't know what that is. But So I'm planning on getting and my wife is also an artist. And she does more whimsical style stuff. So I have a really cool idea for the end credits of the short as well. I've already talked to her about it, and she's like, oh yeah, that's an awesome idea. And so when I get closer with that, I want to make sure when those things get put in motion, my wife doing some of the stuff I need her to do, and then my friend doing a 2.0 version of the poster that's a little bit more epic and grandiose.
That there's a release date in sight.
Exactly. I want to make sure that I'm done animating, that I'm in the process of editing, which I love. I am an editor by trade, and so
okay, cool.
Yeah, and so I'm looking forward to that process of
Brilliant.
just creating in the computer, like seeing the movie come to life. So when that process comes, then I'll have them do it. And that's kind of the rule that I've given myself, because I don't want to release another poster and be like, coming soon, and then it's another 5 years because like my house blows up, or I don't know what happens.
No, I completely understand that, because you feel an obligation to people then when you've asked them to be part of it. You know what I mean? And like in most cases with these kind of things, people are very generous with their time. They're doing it as a kind of a favor. There's the odd person that you pay to do it, but in most cases in this kind of industry at this level that we're at, it is people just giving their time freely, whether it's for voicing and stuff, and you feel an obligation to kind of see it come through. Oh, that's brilliant. And I suppose look, kind of brings us nicely onto a sort of our final section, the sort of advice. And I always just like to, I mean, we've come across so much through this discussion, you know what I mean, in terms of just like your process and your approach. But is there anything that or advice that you could give to someone kind of starting out in animation? Like think back to like, I suppose when you were kind of finding your feet, starting out this project, is there anything you'd like to share in terms of you think?
Absolutely. It's just do it. Like, I think that there's so often I still find myself in this place. There's a trap with creatives to go, oh, if I could just have this piece of equipment.
Yeah.
Oh, if I could just have this software. Oh, if I could just have these lights, then I would. Well, guess what? I have thousands of dollars worth of equipment now. It doesn't change a thing. You still go, oh, if I could just have this, then I would.
It's always that
oh,
one.
if I really could. Yeah. And it really is as simple as just doing it. Like when I did the Go Rogue Tall Tale, when I went into that competition, I didn't have anything. I had a phone, and I had a phone mount on my controller, and I used rubber bands and game cases to, elevate it to where I needed it. And it was just, and I remember just doing it and laughing, and just being like, hey, it works. And no one knows, and really it's not about having that gear. That I will say, having nice gear helps.
Yes.
If you're going to use it, because there's been so many instances where I've had thousands of dollars worth of stuff just sitting around, because of my work, I have access to really nice equipment, and it didn't change a thing. It didn't change my motivation. Ultimately it still came down to me. So my advice to people is if you're thinking about animating, you're like, oh, it doesn't look like Speak Broccolis, well, you have to start somewhere. You have to start somewhere, and just start doing stuff. Have fun with it. Do it because you love it. And honestly, you will find necessity is the mother of invention. You will find creative solutions. And then later you'll look back and you'll be like, it's kind of this chest puffing moment of being, just feeling proud of the work you did, of being like, man, Absolutely. If people only knew the lengths I went through,
the making of,
or the cheesy, how cheesy behind the scenes was, and no one knows. I mean, obviously
they're just seeing this kind of finished thing.
Yeah.
No, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
No, I think that's great advice, because I think you can, you know what I mean? You can put things off forever. And I think sometimes the internet can be a bad thing, because you're always looking at someone who, like you said, with the Go Rogue things, these are professionals. And sometimes there's a misconception, because a lot of stop motion is made with kind of quote unquote toys, that you're looking at it going, oh, it has this air of like, oh, I just found these and www, there you go. And you're like, that looks incredible. And then you sit down to do it and you're like, mine looks terrible. It's like, how are these so good? But I think you're right. You have to start somewhere. And in my experience, the animation community, especially when it comes to stop motion, are very positive. You know what I mean? Like, most of the comments on people's things aren't like, oh, that's terrible, give up. It's like, oh, your thing's a little bit jumpy, maybe try this, or I found this tutorial is great, have a look at this. They're mostly forthcoming. You know what I mean? You'll never get 100%, but
and I agree. And that was actually, while I was been working on Bad Motivator, I found, because there was a behind the scenes video that kind of came along with the Go Rogue competition, and it was them. I saw that. Yeah, it was the animators and the writer and the producers talking about the process. And I found two of the animators, Tucker Berry and I think Ben or Dan McKenzie. I'm pretty sure it's Ben McKenzie. And Tucker Berry specifically, I found him on Instagram, and I was following him because he's not employed by Leica, but he's worked for Leica. He moves over to Wes Anderson. He helps Wes Anderson with his stuff. I mean, he's in the industry. And I asked him, I said, hey, I'm really curious. What did you use for the sand in the Go Rogue thing? And he goes, oh yeah, it was, he said, we took Elmer's glue, we mixed it with water, and you, as like a paste, and you put it on the surface, and you take actual sand and you pack it on there, and then you dump the residue off, and then you just use like a shop vac or a vacuum, and you just get the excess off.
So it stays.
And so I ended up using the same technique that they used in these high, in my opinion, high level stop motion shorts.
Wow. Yeah.
Like I was able to, and he's just a guy. He's like, hey, good luck with your short,
And that's so nice. Like that. He's just like here. And like, it's so clever because you look at that sand and you don't realize till you go to animate how like nightmarish actual sand is for stop motion, because you cannot touch it without moving it. And like, if the sand isn't meant to be looking like it's moving, and all of a sudden everything you've put in, it's like moving all over the place, it looks terrible. Whereas that's such a great tip. And like, once you hear that, you're like, that completely makes sense. But it's like looking at a magician, you're like, how the hell have they done that?
Yeah. And then I even went a step further to where like I was like, okay, well, I need sand to go up against the walls a little bit. So I used this stuff called Kinetic Sand. Have you seen it? It's like
I have seen it,
but it's like sand where like, you know, like you can like compress it, and it's like, it looks like sand, but it's got this kind of sticky quality to it. And so I used that, packed it in the corners, glued that down with the water and the glue, and then packed sand on top of that. So it creates
kind of like a rise, like it's collected as it would against the wall.
Yeah.
So brilliant.
Yeah. And so it's been fun to take a technique, take it a step farther myself. And that process is so fun of just going like, man, and the sets as a result, even just in, you know, me showing on Instagram, they look so good, but I can say in camera, they look even better, where I'm just like, this looks like a movie. Like, this looks awesome. You know, so there's like
calling people into the room. Hey, look at this.
Yeah. Look how amazing. That's cool.
That's great. That looks great. That looks like sand. I could have done that in 2 seconds. You're like, no. Yeah. It took hours, but it won't move.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And can I ask just very quickly, when you're animating, do you like to or making sets, do you like kind of like to listen to music or podcasts or stuff, or how do you work when you're
that's a great question away? Yeah, usually what I do actually is sometimes I'll listen to music if I need to for audio, for like dialogue, I'll do it all by ear. You know, put the track on there and I'll just do it that way, and maybe I'll have some music, but yeah, typically I listen to music. The thing I've listened to the most has been there's a great podcast called Rebel Force Radio. It's a Star Wars podcast.
Yes, I'm an avid listener of that.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
So,
man.
Yeah, I found them back in 2016. I just finished Tall Tale, and Rogue One had come out, and I was so hyped for that movie.
Yes.
That I needed to talk. I needed to like talk about it. I needed to, and like my coworkers were done talking about it. They were like, and so a lot of them hadn't seen it yet, because I'm like hardcore, like see it the first day, you know.
Nice.
And so
it's so nice to have people who are as passionate talking and the kind of almost talking about theories that you've wondered about, and then new things that you haven't even considered.
So I found, I was like, there's got to be like a Star Wars podcast, because I worked for a grocery store, and like I would get there really early in the morning, like 5 a.m, 4 a.m, and you know, like, so they allowed us to like have one earbud in, you know.
Brilliant.
And so I was like, I wonder if there's a Star Wars podcast, and then I found Rebel Force Radio, and it was, the first episode was their roundtable talking about Rogue One. They had just come back from the premiere, and they were going full bore. And I was like, these are my people. And so, that started. Yeah. So I listen to a lot of Rebel Force Radio. And specifically when I'm animating, if I'm all caught up, I go back through to the very beginning, and I've been slowly working my way, through that.
Wow.
So
that's amazing. And I suppose it's such a nice tie-in, because your animation is heavily set in, that Star Wars world. Mm-hmm. Hearing them talk about things and just setting you in there, it must be just such a nice complementary kind of
it totally experience. Yeah. And it helps me to get my mind off of my surroundings, where I can I get very immersed in the Star Wars as a whole, yes, but then also just what I'm doing, because my area is very restricting. I don't have a whole lot of space to spread out. And so sometimes that can get to me too, where I start to feel a little claustrophobic. And so listening to something helps me to just stay the course, keep the hand to the plow, as it were, and just just knock it out.
I always find, especially with that, because I'm a big Star Wars fan myself, but I find that I have such a weak spot for like people when they're passionate about something, and it could be anything. It could be like a collection of guitars or posters or whatever, but when people are passionate about something and can speak at it confidently and at length, I think there's something incredibly like enduring about that, where you're just like, I could listen to them talk on, because they just really know it and really love it. And I think that passion comes through when you're listening to it, and it puts you in a great place, because there's a lot of podcasts you listen to where they're kind of taking things down a bit. And I think it's so easy to do that. You know what I mean? You could pick fault in anything. Nothing is perfect. Whereas I like with these, it's mostly positive, and it's getting people
I agree.
on, it's championing. And I think it's puts you in a great mood.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like, I get tired of the online community, like, and I love what Jason and Jimmy do at Rebel Force Radio, in that they just love Star Wars for the sake of Star Wars. Every now and then they'll voice a frustration they have with,
which is fair,
movie. And and I get that. I can go there too. But some of my friends, even, I'm like, I just want to talk about Star Wars. I want to talk about, hey, in this movie, why do you think they did this? And they're like, well, I just think it was because of bad writing, and that movie sucks, and I hate this and I hate that. And I'm like,
great conversation.
Like, can we just like stay
talk about
lore?
it? Yeah.
Like, can we just I just love Star Wars, like, like, so what, I'm wearing Kylo Ren on my shirt, or so what, like, oh, I hate that movie, oh, I hate that. I'm like, guys, can we just
there is a lot of
back to like
a lot of like animosity towards that, and I don't know if like it's too general to say. I don't know if it's because as like filmmakers and people who enjoy kind of making things, and I think there's always, you just kind of want to understand things. Like there's certain scenes that I probably love that you don't, and vice versa. But even the scenes that I didn't like, or things that I didn't like about Star Wars, I'd have a lot of patience and understanding for figuring out why they went that way. You know what I mean? Because it's very easy after the fact to be like, I wouldn't have done that. Like, okay, great. Show me your work so far, and let's
and I can look objectively even at like the sequel trilogy. I can look objectively and be like, how would I have done it, and how I would have done it would have been different. But at the same time, it's here to stay. And I was a huge fan of the prequels when a lot of people weren't. And it's that
was my Star Wars. Like when I was like got into Star Wars, it was because of the prequels. Like I remember being obsessed with Qui-Gon Jinn and feeling robbed. I was like, why did they kill him off?
Oh yeah.
You're just like, okay, we can't have that argument again. Don't mention Qui-Gon Jinn around them. He's gonna go off on one.
And I think that like I personally got to witness society accept. They went from hating those movies, like a lot of fans, because I grew up on the original trilogy, but I even liked the prequels, and people are like, well, don't you know that there's bad dialogue, and don't you know there's bad? I'm like, yeah, man. Like, and they're like, well, you're a filmmaker, you should know these things, it's really important. I'm like, I do.
I love that argument. It's like, you're into films, how do you like that?
It's like, and they use that as ammo against you, and I'm like, it's not gonna work. No, it's not gonna work.
You're not gonna it's not gonna work on me. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I would definitely, with a final question, I'd love to know of the sequel trilogy, the films that have come out, both the standalones and stuff. Do you have a favorite? Because I imagine your favorite all time is probably rooted in the original trilogy.
Mine, it sort of just changes. I don't really have a favorite.
Okay.
It really just depends on like what I'm feeling in the moment. And yes, that even means sometimes the sequel trilogy, like there's certain ones where I'm like, I'm really feeling that, or a memory will kind of come up, because memories are very attached to movies for me. I can tell you, if you say a year, I can tell you at least a few movies that came out during that year, where I was, who I was with, and so, but for me right now, like I would say, if I'm looking at just the Disney era, I loved, of the movies, loved Rogue One. Like, that was like the one where I was like, because I liked The Force Awakens. And that was really uncharted waters for all of us, for a movie that was not part of the Skywalker saga. It was its own thing. And for me, I was like, Star Wars is in good hands. Like with that movie, for me, that was like,
I always remember in the build up to it, because I did, I really enjoyed Force Awakens, and I know the argument of, it's just a, rehash of New Hope. And, but you're like, you could say that about a lot of films, like in broad strokes, but I just thought it was everything that you loved about Star Wars. It was fun. It used the old characters very well. It established some great new ones. But I just thought, I always remember in the build up to Rogue One, there was something so cool about seeing like a Palm Springs type beach with stormtroopers on it.
Yeah.
Where I was like, your typical landscapes where snow, sand is in desert and forest. And the idea that there was like these palm trees and water, and it's so silly to say, but I was like, they're in the tropics, and there was just something so like, wow, there's a whole planet of like tropics in there, and it just visually it looked great. And I remember just being like, I'm really excited about this movie.
The story of sacrifice, and it to me added so much emotional resonance to even the I'm getting like goosebumps even thinking about it, of like the trench run in A New Hope, of what the stakes were already high, but now that we got to see what the events that led to that moment, they're even higher for me. So now when I watch A New Hope, I'm like, wow, dude, this has so much more weight to it. And I think that, maybe not for everybody, but definitely for me, and I think that that's an important thing too, is like your favorite Star Wars movie might not be my favorite Star Wars movie. That doesn't make you or me any less of a fan as a result. If somebody loves all that
shared universe,
if somebody loves, the sequel trilogy, and that was what got them into Star Wars, great. Like I just met somebody who was like, "Oh my gosh, I love Rey," and I'm like, "Cool." Like, people are like, "Well, actually, you shouldn't love Rey, and let me tell you all the reasons why."
You're right. Actually,
true fans. I've had people say only true fans don't. Like, I'm like, dude. First off, you're like 20 years old, and I've been watching Star Wars since before you were born. Okay, do not pull that line.
I don't appreciate your insights. It's like some sort of religious zealots almost. You're like, true
and
fans.
So and it's like, I get it. Like the Holy Grail is, the original trilogy, historically, what it did for film, what it did for culture. We all agree, like that the original trilogy is like untouchable. I'm like, on that level. But in terms of like, you love episode 1. I love episode 1. Like I love episode 1. I was awesome.
Honestly, that was my first like proper, like I was aware of Star Wars and I'd watched Star Wars, but it was always a little bit older, and when especially the pod racing came out, I just remember being like, holy, like I had never seen anything like that, where the sound of them and just the actual action kind of sequences,
the immersion
too, and the lightsaber battles,
shots with the engines, and
it was like a whole new style with those lightsaber scenes, where the older ones were much more kind of slow and they had a different pacing to them, whereas these ones were like very acrobatic, and you're like, holy God, what's happening here? But man, it was such a pleasure to talk to you. I think I'm definitely going to have to go watch Rogue One now after this, just from talking about it, which is no bad thing. But can I just ask finally, is there a place where people can reach you? I know you're kind of fairly active on Instagram. Is that the best place to?
I would say that's the best place. If you go, you type in Lord Tharp, THARP, Lord Tharp on Instagram, you'll see me pop up. And it's, there's some, personal stuff. I don't know. I just try as best I can to just share whatever I'm working on currently. Project. I have been very busy. And so it's funny. Sometimes I'll look through my Instagram and I'll see, this is only what people see, but I'm like, there's so much that I do just because of my job, and
just
as an
haven't
editor,
got a chance to share.
And there's videos, like I've done Kickstarter videos for people in the past couple of years. I've done videos for wineries, like so I do a lot of stuff. I just don't always post it. And so
but I have to say, I completely would completely encourage people to check out your Instagram, just even from the behind the scenes kind of content. It's just great. I think you can pick up a lot of tips in terms of what you've shared, and even just seeing your process. I think it's great when you see the final film come out then, because you've seen little bits of the build up. It's not just like, oh, where did this thing come from? You're like, oh, this is this project.
And in a way, people see the struggle too.
Absolutely.
What it can take to fight life. Fighting life responsibilities and pursuing your passions. And I think that that's something that I hope people get from that too, so.
Absolutely. Well, look, I just want to say thank you so much for being so generous with your time.
Absolutely.
And I'll be one of those ones keeping an eye out for Bad Motivator and all the bits that kind of come out along the way. So
I just want to thank you too for your just your enthusiasm, but also just you doing your own. I've just been inspired by, you and seeing your progress, from the first time you and I met. It just like, you're an inspiration to me. So yeah.
Well, that's the quote I'm going to pull from this. I'm just going to be like, hey, you'll never guess what. Like, I got a t-shirt made now and everything.
Yeah.
Honestly, man, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah,
and absolutely likewise. So thanks again, man, and talk to you soon.
So that is it for another episode of Cartoon Cosmonauts. I'd like to say a huge thank you to my guest Jeff Tharp for coming onto the show and talking about his short Go Rogue Tall Tale. Be sure to check out his YouTube page and also his Instagram account for all his great behind the scenes content, both of which I will leave links to below. There really are some fantastic tips and insights into set design in particular on his Instagram, so definitely check that out. And if you'd like to get in touch with me, perhaps with some questions, feedback, or even to discuss your own short on the show, then you can find me online as Speak Broccoli on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Just look for the green broccoli logo. You can also email speakbroccoli@gmail.com. Thank you for taking the time to join me here today. I've been your host, Joseph Orr, and you've been listening to the cosmic sounds of Cartoon Cosmonauts.